My daughter vanished into the woods with her cult partner and returned pregnant. She gave birth, then left the baby behind. The hospital asked if I'd raised the child, but I said no. When my 18-year-old told me she was 5 months pregnant, she also told me it was my fault. Not just the pregnancy, but everything. According to her, if I had truly accepted her non-binary identity, she wouldn't be in this situation at all. And now, she wants me to raise the child, like it's mine, as if I'm the one who needs to make things right. What happened next changed our family forever. My daughter, Avery, came out as non-binary when she was 16. She told me she didn't always feel like a girl. Some days she felt like a boy, other days like nothing at all. She asked me to start each morning by guessing what pronoun of the day she was using. I told her that wasn't going to work. I said I'd call her whatever pronoun she wanted, but she had to tell me. I wasn't going to play a daily guessing game. That routine lasted about 2 weeks before she said I could just call her she. She still identifies as non-binary, but that phase, the hypervigilance about pronouns, fizzled out on its own. I don't say that dismissively. I've seen this pattern before. I used to hang around the online soul self communities on LiveJournal back in the 2000s, where identity meant something different every week. So I wasn't shocked. I tried to keep up. I wanted to meet her where she was. But I also started noticing something darker underneath the shifts. Anger, mistrust, a sense that I could never do enough to prove I accepted her. That whatever I did, I was still the enemy. Avery was born in Missoula, Montana. After the divorce, we moved to Oregon. She wanted to take a gap year after high school before starting at Willamette Community College. I said okay, but she needed to work. She got hired, then fired, then hired again, then quit. 4 or 5 jobs in under a year. When I asked why, she said retail was hostile to her non-binary identity. But from the outside, she looked like a typical young woman. Cute jeans, painted nails, long hair. When I asked what happened, she'd snap at me or change the subject. She refused to consider call centers, didn't want to talk on the phone, wanted a remote job, didn't find one. After Thanksgiving, she quit her last job on Black Friday and didn't look again. She's been unemployed ever since. By early January, I'd had enough. I told myself I'd give her until spring semester. But come January 10th, I was sitting her down and preparing to lay out the rules. Full-time school or full-time job, or she moves out. That night, she sat across from me and said she was pregnant. She was 5 months along. She hadn't said a word before then. She'd known for weeks, maybe longer. She hadn't seen a doctor, hadn't told the father, wouldn't even tell me who he was. And now she was blaming me, not just for missing the signs, but for everything. I wouldn't be in this position if you'd put me on puberty blockers when I came out, she said. Instead, you gave me birth control. I blinked. I had no idea what she was talking about. She'd never asked for hormone blockers. Not once. The birth control? That had been her choice, or so I thought. Her school gave out condoms and health info like candy. She had access. And now she was saying I'd feminized her against her will? That's when I snapped. I called her a little idiot. I've never used that word with her. Not ever. But something inside me cracked. All the late nights worrying, the rent I covered while she ghosted job after job, the support I gave when she needed it. It came rushing up. And then she said the thing I'll never forget. I think of the baby as my sibling, she whispered, and I want you to raise them. It's your responsibility, not mine. My ears were ringing. My stomach flipped. I asked her to repeat it, like I hadn't heard her right. But I had. She wanted me to raise her baby, like it was mine. I told her no, absolutely not. That I loved her, but she had made her choices, and she would need to live with them. She screamed, locked herself in her room, didn't come out for 12 hours. She had snacks, water, her own bathroom. She could hold out for days. By morning, she was gone. She left a note saying she was staying with a friend, that she'd already called the police to say she left voluntarily. So don't bother reporting me missing, it said. She even underlined it. She didn't say goodbye. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know who the father is. I don't know if she's seeing a doctor. I don't even know where she is. And yet the worst part is this. I have a feeling she expects to come back. That someday soon she'll knock on the door, with a baby in her arms, and act like nothing ever happened. But I'm not ready to raise another child. And I never agreed to raise hers. 3 days after Avery walked out, she unblocked my number. Her text was short. No apology. No explanation. Just, me and Alex want to talk. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. IHOP. No, Mom. No, please. Just a command, like I was being summoned. I knew who Alex was. At least, I thought I did. He'd been part of Avery's high school friend group. I tolerated most of them. But Alex? He was the one I couldn't stand. The one I had banned from my house. 2 years ago, during one of their movie nights, I walked through the living room and caught him making fake orgasm sounds every time I passed. Loud. Obnoxious. Eyes locked on mine, like it was a game. The first time, I tried to laugh it off. The second, I warned him. The third, he followed me into the kitchen and mimed something so disturbing and inappropriate. I turned around mid-motion and told him to get out. He didn't argue, just smirked and left. Avery defended him, of course. Said he was just joking, that he was misunderstood. And then, mercifully, their friendship seemed to fade. I hadn't heard about him in almost a year. Until now. When I pulled into the IHOP parking lot, my hands were shaking. Part of me still hoped this would be a turning point, that maybe Avery wanted to reconnect. Maybe she'd come to her senses. But when I walked inside and saw them sitting there, I knew better. She looked hollow, pale, thin. The spark in her eyes was gone. She wore a gray hoodie 2 sizes too big and kept her arms crossed like she was trying to disappear. Alex looked exactly how I remembered, only more smug. Chipped black nail polish, unkempt hair, that same unsettling grin like he was constantly holding in a bad joke. There was a new tattoo on his neck, unreadable letters, half-faded. I didn't ask. As soon as I sat down, he started talking. Not Avery. Him. You poisoned her, he said, leaning forward. You forced her onto birth control. You feminized her against her will. I blinked. She asked for the pill. She filled the prescription herself. She never said anything about not wanting it. You should have given her puberty blockers at 16, he said. My mouth went dry. That's the first I've heard of that. She didn't say anything because she didn't feel safe with you, he snapped. And now, because of you, she's pregnant. I looked at Avery. She didn't speak, didn't even flinch, just stared down at her water glass, nodding like she was reading a script. You don't get it, he went on. This baby is your responsibility. You broke her. You fix it. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry, but I'm not raising your child. He slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. Then you'll never see them. Either of them. I turned to Avery. Is this what you want? She finally looked at me, and I swear, I didn't recognize her. Her eyes were glassy, her mouth drawn tight. She didn't look sad. She looked gone. She thinks of the baby as her sibling, Alex said, answering for her. She wants you to raise it. No, I said again. I raised my child. I'm not doing it again. You two made choices. You're adults now. My parents won't take us in, Alex muttered, like that sealed the deal. They're worse than you. I sat there, stunned. The level of delusion was staggering. They didn't want a family. They wanted a savior. A permanent escape hatch from accountability. And I was supposed to be it. Avery never said a word in her own defense. Just nodded along. Let him speak for her. Let him twist the narrative until I was the villain. Again, I left that IHOP sick to my stomach. Not just because of what was said, but because I realized I had lost my daughter. Maybe not forever, but for now, she's not here. She's with him. She believes him. And I can't fix that. It was a Thursday, mid-afternoon. I was folding laundry with a documentary about wild Mustangs playing in the background. One of those peaceful, grassy ones that used to calm Avery as a kid. We used to squeal over the new foals together. Now, the sound of the horses made me ache. My phone rang. Caller ID, Miriam Hastings. My neighbor, 3 doors down, and the kind of person who never calls unless it's serious. Miriam. I answered, instantly alert. She didn't waste time. I saw Avery, she said, voice low and tense. Just an hour ago, at the edge of the forest. She was with that boy, the one with the neck tattoo. I gripped the phone. You're sure it was her? She looked not right. Dirty. Her clothes were hanging off her. She had a backpack, torn open on one side. I called out, but she didn't stop. Just disappeared into the trees. My stomach dropped. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the spot on the wall above the couch where Avery used to hang her art projects. She was out there, in those woods, with him, not just camping, living. And then, unexpectedly, an old memory snapped back, sharp, unwelcome, but undeniably mine. I was 19, that age when you think you know everything. I'd met a guy named Kyle in a community college psych class. He wore thrift store jackets and called himself an urban philosopher. Said we were all just broken satellites looking for connection. I was smitten. We ran off to stay in a squat he knew downtown. 3 rooms, 2 mattresses, and 0 rules. It felt exciting for the first few days. Then came the mood swings, the manipulation. And the night I questioned him in front of the others, he locked me out. No explanation. No coat. Just the heavy door slamming shut. I spent the night behind a closed gas station, huddled between 2 trash bins. I never forgot that cold. And I never went back. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't brainwashed. But I remember what it's like to think you've found a new truth only to realize it's a mirage wrapped in control. That memory stuck with me as I grabbed my keys and drove toward the forest where Miriam had seen her. The area isn't on any map, just a sprawl of broken-down RVs, handmade plywood shelters, and sagging tents arranged in loose clusters. There's no electricity, no bathrooms, just smoke from too many campfires and the stench of mildew. I didn't find her, but I found a man in one boot and a fishing vest, swaying gently by the road, smoking something suspicious. He squinted at me like I was a hallucination. "You looking for someone?" he asked, voice slurred. "A girl," I said. "Pregnant. Tattoos. With a guy who talks too much." He sniffed. "Yeah, loud chick. Always yelling about fate or some crap. She's with the skinny twerp who thinks he's a prophet. You her mom?" I didn't answer. "Girl like that don't belong out here," he muttered, already drifting off. That night, I filed a report with the local police. Told them Avery was 5 months pregnant and possibly living in an unregulated camp with a controlling partner. They said she was an adult, and unless she was reported missing or in immediate danger, their hands were tied. I also called CPS, explained the situation in detail. They said they'd flag it, but unless the baby was born into clear harm, there wasn't much they could do. 3 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Don't come looking again. You're not welcome." Hey, Avery. It felt like someone had punched me in the throat. No "hi mom." No apology. No warmth. Just a warning. Like I was the threat. Like the roles had reversed, and I'd become the intruder. I called the number. Disconnected. I sat in silence, phone pressed to my chest, remembering all the times she'd curled into my side during thunderstorms. All the mornings I'd made pancakes with smiley faces and blueberries just to see her laugh. Now she was somewhere in the trees, pregnant and hiding, convinced I was the villain in her story. And the worst part? I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was coming. Something none of us were prepared for. I almost didn't recognize her. It was a scorching Tuesday afternoon. I'd just come back from the grocery store, milk, eggs, a frozen lasagna I didn't really need, and, on impulse, a small pack of newborn diapers I kept telling myself were just in case. I wasn't sure if I hoped to use them or hoped I wouldn't have to. And there she was, barefoot on my porch, one hand resting on her swollen belly like a declaration of war. She looked feral. Her skin was sunburned, her hair tangled and brittle, and her face, it looked older than mine. Not in the natural way people age, but like someone had pressed fast forward on her life. I stood frozen, 2 paper bags sagging in my arms. She grinned like it was any ordinary day. "Hey, Mom," she said. Not angry, not desperate, not even relieved. Just casual, like she'd been out walking the dog and decided to pop back in. She brushed past me into the house, chattering nonstop. About the fate, about the community, and how she and sperm donor were part of a movement of new people. She used those exact words, new people. Ones without gender expectations, who shared everything. Homes, partners, babies. I followed her into the kitchen in stunned silence. It wasn't just the words. It was how animated she was. Lit up, as if she were on stage and I was the lone member of her audience. She didn't mention the baby once. I asked, gently, "When are you due?" She blinked like I'd spoken in Morse code. "Mid-July. Or maybe late July. We don't do clocks in the community. Time's a cage." And just like that, she moved on. From a baby growing inside her to how sperm donor was the center of the wheel, and she was one of the sacred spokes. That their movement was growing fast, and they were all preparing for something big. That night, I lay awake in my room, her voice drifting through the wall in long, fevered monologues. She talked to herself, or maybe to someone who wasn't there. Maybe to someone who never was. She didn't clean up after herself. Left wrappers on the couch. Didn't flush. asked me to take her out to Taco Bell, not as a request, but as an entitlement. She said she shouldn't have to cook because she was carrying the vessel. She said, "Queens don't do dishes." So I took her, part of me desperate to find some sliver of the girl I once raised. But even in line at the drive-thru, she wouldn't shut up about the fate, about how this baby was destined to help rebuild a world free from binary. "This is the first of many," she said proudly, as if she were delivering a prophecy, not a child. Later, I asked, "So, do you plan to keep the baby?" She tilted her head. "Maybe, maybe not. We might gift the baby to another part of the movement. Depends where the spirit wind blows." It chilled me. There was no plan, no doctor, no name, no crib, just vague cosmic nonsense about vibrations and sacred births. I checked her bag later that night. No vitamins, no documents. Just crumbs, 2 pairs of socks, and a stained comic book. 3 nights later, it started. The moaning came first. Low, then sharp, then screaming. I knocked once. No answer. I pushed open her door and found her on all fours, sweat pouring down her face. I called 911. This time, she didn't argue. Maybe because the pain was real. Maybe because the prophecy hadn't prepared her for contractions. In the hospital, everything broke. She was a nightmare to the staff. Paranoid, ranting, and cruel. She accused nurses of being spies, told the doctor he was trying to poison her sacred vessel. When a nurse gently placed a monitor on her belly, she slapped her hand away and called her a witch. She screamed that she was their queen, and no one could command her. They handled her with inhuman patience. One nurse, after a particularly vile outburst, gave me a small nod of sympathy. I pulled her aside and explained, where Avery had been living, the control sperm donor had, the chaos. I admitted I suspected drugs. When the test came back negative, I was floored. She wasn't high. This was all her. No meth, no pills, no THC, just full-blown delusion, driven by whatever she'd absorbed in that camp. She refused to let me in the room for delivery. And honestly, I was relieved. I don't think I could have watched her like that, screaming at kind people, spitting venom while her child struggled into the world. The baby was born late that night. Healthy, good weight, no drugs in their system. And Avery? She left. Just like that. Didn't sign discharge papers. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out of the hospital like she was done with her shift. The hospital is a safe surrender site. So no charges. No legal battle. Just an empty crib in a quiet room. And a child who deserved so much more. I stood outside the nursery for what felt like hours. Inside, the baby was sleeping. Or at least I hoped they were. The nurses had taken to calling them Pumpkin, probably because they had no name. That detail, no name, hit harder than I expected. Like the child didn't yet fully exist in the world because no one had claimed them. Not their mother, not their father, and now not me. I wish I could say I walked into that room and felt a rush of love. That seeing a tiny, helpless newborn stirred something deep in me. That I knew, then and there, that I would raise them. But that's not how it happened. Instead, I froze in the hallway, heart clenched tight in my chest, torn between guilt and the raw truth of what this would mean. In my head, I heard Avery's voice. Not the little girl I'd raised, but the young woman who returned from the woods like a stranger. The one who called the baby a vessel for a new people. The one who didn't want a child, only a prophecy fulfilled. When the nurse asked if I wanted to hold the baby, I said, maybe later. I never went back. Instead, I asked for the hospital social worker. We sat in a quiet room off the main corridor. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, an old coffee machine humming in the corner. She was kind, professional, asked if I'd consider taking the baby, even temporarily. I asked what that would mean legally, financially, emotionally. What if Avery came back? What if sperm donor reappeared and demanded custody? What if I said yes, and they used the baby to anchor themselves into my life forever? I thought about everything Avery had said before she left again. The wild talk about genderless communities, about spreading the new people. She never once said she loved her baby. Never once said she wanted to raise them. I looked the social worker in the eye and said it quietly, so only she could hear. No, I can't do this. She didn't flinch. She nodded and said, thank you for being honest. It felt like betrayal. It still does. But I also know it was survival. That baby deserved stability. A home. A name. Not a grandmother constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next text from the woods. Not a life built on guilt and fear. The baby went into emergency foster care. I don't pretend it's a perfect system, but it's better than the alternative, a plywood shack in the forest, surrounded by paranoia and delusion. A few days later, Avery resurfaced. Not at the hospital. Not with concern. She sent a single message through a mutual friend. We're trying again. This time, it'll work. The next vessel is already chosen. That was all. No mention of the baby she left behind. No acknowledgement that she'd given birth. Just more talk of fate and cycles and destiny. I started therapy. Real therapy. The kind where you're forced to confront not just what happened, but who you were when it did. My therapist said something I still repeat to myself. Boundaries aren't abandonment. They're survival. I keep the door to Avery's old room shut. Not as punishment, but because I can't walk by it without falling apart. Her art is still on the walls. Her books still on the shelf. It's like a museum of who she used to be. Some nights, I dream about the baby. Not vividly, just a shape wrapped in a hospital blanket, resting quietly somewhere I can't reach. And I wonder, did someone name them? Are they okay? Will they grow up never knowing any of this? God, I hope so. I hope they never read about this, never find out what happened. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I want their beginning to be clean, untouched by madness. Free. I think that's the best gift I could give. And maybe, just maybe, it's enough.